good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from across North America, truly coast to coast today for another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. My name is Jesse. I'm here with the team, and if you guys are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Today, it's special for a number of reasons. Number one, we've got some of my all-time favorite classes. Honestly, Miss Swank's, Miss Paget, our Alpaca crew, Miss McDowell's class, Miss Fisher. You guys rock. We've got like the all-star lineup of the best American classes today because it's like a national holiday in Canada today. So you guys are it. We are representing all over the United States. It's so nice to have you. Two, it's exciting because we are continuing our epic Wild Hope series. This has been my favorite series all year long. Don't tell the other series, because we are featuring the most positive, amazing conservation stories featuring just really charismatic people working to save habitats and species around the globe. If you haven't checked out wildhope.tv, there are amazing YouTube videos, the rest of our series on our YouTube channel. There's so much to explore and discover. We've got one tomorrow with manatees. We wrapped up one on Friday with black-footed ferrets. It's been so much fun. We'd really love your feedback at the end. Now, today we are going to have a kahoot between our talk and our Q&A, but I'm going to get you all the game pin for that later. I've got to go make it. I've got to do my job a little more properly between our talk and Q&A. I'm so excited, too, because today we're bringing in a new speaker on a new topic. Luis Zambrano is an amazing global conservationist joining us live in Mexico today, and his work is around saving axolotls. Now, when I was a boy, when I was the age of the kids in your classes, I was like the only person who knew about these guys, the coolest salamander in the world. And now they're like one of the most popular, awesome animals in the world, in no small part thanks to the effort of Luis and his amazing team. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him in, say a quick hello, and then we're going to show you a little clip from the Wild Hope episode as well. So Luis, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Hello, Jesse. How are you? I'm quite happy to be with you and with all the schools here.
I'm so happy to be with you too. I will say to our classes too, with you here, I do test calls before every program, and you were one of the most enthusiastic people I've ever run across. And I've talked to a lot of really keen scientists and conservationists, and you are just full of brimming with passion for your animal. It's so nice to see.
Thank you very much. Well, let's talk about it in a few minutes.
Yes, I'm going to start with this little 1.5 minute clip, and then if you want to bring up your presentation after that, we will be all good to go. So let me cue this up, put us in the background, and play our little video. Here we go.
My love with axolotls is a second date love. It was not first date love. Normally, the first date is with people that you are attracted to. And the axolotls are the complete opposite. They are really slimy, small, dark, but they are really interesting in many ways. The axolotl can regrow tissues. If it loses the limb, or it loses the tail, or it loses the gills, or even the eye or the brain, he or she can regenerate the tissues and be as good as new. Suddenly, in the last 10-15 years, the animal became really popular. You started to see people in love of axolotls in Germany, in Japan, in Korea, in the US. They love the axolotls as pets.
If I knew nothing else about you, then that second date love was your highlight for axolotls. I would love it already. This is so much fun. Well, that was a perfect primer and intro, and I know you're going to dive into all those topics in more detail. So if you want to bring up your presentation and take us away, you are good to go, man.
Yeah, thank you. I will do that at this moment.
Perfect. Thanks so much. As I said in my intro too, like there's so much more interest in them now. 1 million in captivity is wild. I had no idea that was the case, but it's exciting as we dive in. You are good to go, Luis. So I'm going to put myself in the background and you can take us away, man.
Thank you very much. I mean, yes, one of the important things now is that there are not too many in the wild, and there are too many in captivity, which creates these false sensations that everything is okay, but it's not okay for axolotls. And that is one of the things that I want to talk about all of you. The axolotl actually is an Aztec god. I mean, this is part of our culture as Mexicans. But this Aztec god used to live in a in a nice wetland, which was called Xochimilco. I know that many of you won't be able to speak properly Xochimilco because it's very, very difficult word. But if you try to start to practice and say Xochimilco, then maybe in some moment you can come here and say, I want to see axolotls in Xochimilco, and then everybody will understand you. So the axolotl is this magnificent creature that I've told you, that you saw in the video, that it was a second date. I fall in love in the second date, not in the first date. So you can see them. They are very nice. They have a very nice smile. They are small, slimy, as I've told, dark. All of them are dark. Actually, the one that you see in the internet or you buy in the pet store, which are white, are basically not the ones that live in the wild area. That is one of the things that are highly important to notice for conservation, because the ones that we have to conserve are these dark ones, not the white ones, which won't survive in the wild. But the axolotl is not the only one species that lives in Mexico. We have 17 species that live in Mexico, and actually one of those lives not only in Mexico, but also goes through the US and arrives to Canada, actually. This is the mud puppy that passed through the US and also lives in Canada. So we have a lot of axolotls in Mexico City, 17 species. Many of them are endangered, as the Axolotl mexicanum, which is the one that lives in Mexico City, the one that I want to talk about that in few minutes. Well, this is why it's so highly interesting for biologists like myself. I mean, it's very interesting for everybody because it has very nice morphology, this smile, these gills, and everybody loves them, and that's the reason they like them in the world. But for a biologist, also they have very interesting features that are also highly important for many things. For example, the regrowing tissues. I mean, as you saw in the video, you can see that they can regrow any part of the limbs or gills or eyes or brains. They can regrow anything in their body, which is very interesting for us as a biologist in terms of how do they do that, and also for medical research, because maybe we can copy some of their characteristics for increase the health of the people. Maybe if you have an accident and you have a very ugly scar, maybe axolotls can help us to understand how can you regrow a part of the tissue and then reduce this scar, for example. The DNA, I mean, the DNA is this code, the genetic code that all of us have that makes us, for example, humans and others, axolotls and others, monkeys. The DNA is the library that we have in our cells. In every cell, we have our library, and the library of the axolotl is massive. It's 10 times larger than the library that have the humans. So they have by far more information that we have in our own cells. And why is that? We don't know, and we want to know, and we want to understand what is happening with this huge and immense library that axolotls have. And finally, I put here Peter Pan, because that means the easiest way to understand what is the fancy word that biology says, like, is neoteny. Neoteny is this type of characteristic that axolotls have, that they never grow. They stay as a child, and they can reproduce and survive as a childhood. As you may know, when you are a child, you have some characteristics, and when you are growing up, you change your characteristics. All the animals have that type of things, but the axolotls decide to stay as an child and live the rest of their life as a children. So that is very, very interesting also for us as a biologist, because we don't understand why they are doing these type of things. Well, as I've told you, this is an Aztec god, and that is not something like I invented myself. I mean, Aztecs decided that the axolotl was an Aztec god. It was a very strange god. It was the twin monster of the most important god of the Aztecs, Quetzalcoatl, and he was the twin god. And the axolotls come from A, which what means in Nahuatl water monster, and xolotl water movement, sorry, and Xolotl, which means monster or twin brother. So this is the water movement monster twin brother of the most important god. That is the things that means axolotl. This is not the only animal that represents this twin brother. The other interesting and nice animal that represents this twin brother, maybe you will recognize it because you have seen it in Coco, the movie. This is the Cholo Escuincle. I don't know if you remember, if you saw the movie Coco, you will see that Cholo Escuincle, this small dog that helps the protagonist to go through all the adventures, is this very strange dog. This strange dog is Cholo Escuincle, which means the same twin brother god. So Xolotl, as you can see, is the name of the god. Cholo Escuincle is the name of the dog, and Axolotl is the name of the amphibian. So as you can see, our part of the history of the axolotls, part of the history of the Aztecs is highly bring together and mixed in a very nice, interesting story. As you can see, there is this regrowth tissue. I mean, if they lose the limb, there is a lot of scientific research of how they do regrow, and you can see these nice pictures that we're talking about 20 years ago, in which an axolotl lose the limb and how they started to regrow in only 31 days. Only in a month they can regrow their own limbs. So this is like a superhero characteristic. So they are kind of superhero animals. But not only in terms of biology. I mean, I don't know if you know Diego Rivera. Maybe you know more Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo was the wife of Diego Rivera, which also was a very important painting. Both of them were a very interesting couple because they paint a lot in Mexico in the last century, which they were very important in terms of the culture of Mexico, basically. And Diego Rivera used to paint many things for Mexican characteristics, and you can see the axolotl in the middle of this painting. This mural that is in the center of Mexico City is a mural that represents the water, is highly important for Mexican citizens. And in the middle there is a human, but also below the human, besides the human, is the axolotl. That was as important the axolotl was in this culture, in our culture, even in the last century. So it was so important that was as a used in the post office in the Olympic Games. We had an Olympic Games. Mexico organized the Olympic Games in 1968, and they decided that in the post office they put the axolotl in the middle. So the axolotl was very, very important for Mexicans for many time, for a long time. And maybe you have seen this. This is the 50 pesos bill that is now in Mexico City that represents the axolotl, and the axolotl is highly important for us as we started to regrow our love for the axolotls in the last 20 years. As Jesse says, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, nobody knew about axolotls. In the rest of the world, in Mexico, we didn't like him, but since 25 years to now, we started to appreciate, to regrow our love for this important animal for Mexico and for the rest of the world. As you can see, this peso has also the habitat of the axolotl, which is the wetland, that I will talk a little bit about that. But it's not only about the peso. I mean, many companies such as Reebok decided that the axolotl is important, and they designed this tennis in honoring the axolotl. So the axolotl, where the axolotl used to live? The axolotl used to live in a huge valley in Mexico City. These were this huge 5-lake system that was alive when Mexico City was dominated by Aztecs. As you can see, these lakes were very, very large and surrounded all the city when we were in those times. Now, this is the landscape that you can see in Xochimilco. If you want to practice with me, Xochimilco, and you can see in the letters how is spelled. Xochimilco. That is the new landscape that we have already. This is not the only landscape. We have this this other type of landscape. And you can ask me, where is the water? The water are in the canals. You see a lines of trees there. These trees are aguejotes, which is a willow. If you see this line of trees, in the middle between the tree and the land, there is a small canal. These canals are like a maze of canals. You can imagine to live in a maze of canals in which the axolotl can survive because they are quite happy, besides the people that grow food. These islands are for growing food. So this type of food, the people normally grows lettuce, tomatoes, radish, kale, maybe many of these type of foods you don't like, maybe some of those you like them. They are quite healthy and they are quite important for Mexican citizens to eat and survive. But it's not only that these canals give food for Mexicans, also they give a lot of biodiversity. You will see a lot of plants, you will see a lot of snakes. Water snakes are live in these areas. Birds, there are, for example, pelicans that comes from Canada and travels around the US and arrive to Xochimilco to pass the winter, because the winter are harsh in Canada, and then they like our weather to pass the winter and to pass Christmas days here. So you can see there is a lot of biodiversity. These are, sorry for the Spanish, these are the chinampas. Chinampas are these square islands in which the people grows food. You can see there in these islands how much food they can grow. And also these canals. In these canals, in this maze of canals, the axolotl can survive. These are other type of canals. They are smaller than this one, like this one. This is about 2 meters, like 6 feet, 7 feet. But this is by far larger, like 20 meters, like 60 feet, something like that. What are the problems with the axolotls? Why they are going to the extinction in the wild? And this is one of the things that they face this problem. Carp and tilapia. These species are from China and from Africa, and they were introduced for aquaculture reasons. But the people that introduced them didn't understand that the axolotls are eaten by carp and by tilapia. Carp eat their eggs, and tilapia eats their juveniles, the small axolotls. So they are a lot of carp and tilapia within Xochimilco. And we have to reduce the amount of these animals in order for axolotls to survive. If not, all of the eggs and juveniles will be eaten by these fish. Also, the problem is pollution. I mean, sometimes the canals are very, very nice, but sometimes the canals are like this in the picture, that is completely brown and with a lot of chemicals. Why this happens? This happens because we are in the middle of the city, and the city doesn't help to increase the water quality. And sometimes the water quality change the pH or the pollutants. And as you might imagine, the axolotls are amphibians, and amphibians breathe with the skin. So the skin is highly, highly sensitive for any change of water quality. So if you have a problem with the water quality, the axolotls can't breathe and then die soon. So that is a second problem that we have. And the third problem is urbanization. I mean, 20 million people will live in Mexico City. So 20 million people are the neighbors of the axolotls. So the axolotls, believe it or not, they don't like too much. The wild axolotls, they don't like too much noise or humans. They are like normal wild animals. They like more quiet things. They like that there are not too noise. For example, I am hearing a lot of noise quite close by here at this moment. I hope that you are not hearing that. But the axolotls don't like this noise, and they die. They stressed a lot, and then when they are stressed, they die as everybody. When you are very, very stressed, then you will have a healthy problems. So one of the things that also we have is the urbanization. So we have to face three huge problems: exotic fish species, water quality, and urbanization, in order to restore the axolotl capacities for survive in the wild. And we started to study that as a scientist. We started to study that. These are part of the canals. We have about 232 kilometers of canals. And in some of them, the axolotls can survive. In some of them, the axolotls cannot survive. And we made this experiment in which we reduce the carp and tilapia population. We fish them all the time. And then after the amount of canals that axolotls could survive are by far smaller the amount than before. So you can see that if we reduce the amount of the exotics, then the axolotls can increase the possibility to survive in different canals, which is highly important because then they gave us the line in order to support this, to support our ideas of restoration. Then we decided, okay, but we can't work reducing carp and tilapia all the time because maybe one of those years there is no financial support for this, and then we have to look for another type of strategies. And we decided to make these refuges. These refuges are, as you can see, this canal is about 1 meter wide, like 3 feet, 3.5 feet, for example. And then you can see small barriers. These small barriers are for increase the water quality, but most importantly, to reduce the carp and tilapia entrance. So the axolotls can be in these refuges, but the carp and tilapia can't be in those refuges. And we started to create this situation in order for increase the amount of canals with refuges in order for leave the carp and tilapia outside of this area. And we succeed. And we started to work with a lot of local farmers in order to increase the amount of refuges for axolotls in these mazes of canals. So we create this refuge chinampa symbiotic relationship in which if the axolotl can survive, the water quality is good enough for rinse the crop for the food production. So the food production is by far healthier, is organic, the people can eat it without any problem, and the water is good enough for the axolotl and their friends, such as crayfishes, for small fishes, insects, snakes. Even snakes are a good friend of the axolotls. So we can have a very, very nice, interesting relationship between farmers and biodiversity within one of the most populated cities in the world, which is Mexico City. So we still have some experiments that we are working with. For example, this is a place close by to Xochimilco, which is La Cantera. And we made, for example, experiments how much the axolotls move. And I will show you a small video in which we saw a male and a female, how they can move together and separately when they started to look around this lake. It was in the lake number 3, if I don't remember badly. So you can see, for example, in January, we released the axolotls and we saw that the axolotls were in the south part of the canal and they didn't like it too much to move around. But in February, they changed positions and they decided to go to the north part of the lake. Why? We don't know, but that is part of the interesting thing. But in March, they said, no, let's start to move around all the time. And you can see that every day, both of them, the male and the female, were moving around along the lake looking for food. So that helped us a lot in order to understand how the axolotls can survive in the wild and how they will help us to understand if their habitat can be restored and how much area we need to create a better habitat for them. So I am finishing with this slide. This slide is for our webpage, restauracionecologica.org. And if you are highly interested in axolotls, if you are highly interested in how they can survive not only in tanks but also in the wild, you can help us and adopt an axolotl. This is a virtual adoption of axolotl. You can adopt an axolotl and for $20, for a little bit more, you can get into the webpage and see how to adopt an axolotl, and we can in return give you which type of name you want to put the axolotl And if this axolotl lives in our colony or lives as an explorer, like the experiments we made, or lives as an old axolotl that want to live her last days very, very well. So I invite you, if you are interested in conservation of the axolotls, you can you can support all of this through this webpage. And thank you very much. This has been a very, very interesting day and talk to you. I mean, I normally don't talk to children, so I hope that this has been highly interesting for all of you. And let's start to talk about that.
Lovely, Luis. Thank you so much, man. I've done 1,700 of these over the years, and it's rare that I run across someone who's so passionate about their animal. I'm going to go donate for an axolotl when I'm done this broadcast. I've got another program after that, and then that is $20 is the least I can do. You're doing such incredible work. You're so passionate about it, and I can't wait to help support. So I'm going to dive in with that. We're going to dive in with questions. First, we're going to do a little Kahoot together. So, Luis, this will be your first time with a Kahoot. This is a little 4-question quiz between our talk and our Q&A today to test our kids' understanding and have a little bit of fun. I put the game pin up on the screen for everybody, so feel free to sign in with that. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. And for those who are new to this, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Luis and I's everlasting respect. So that's what is on the docket for winning at the Kahoot. And then we're going to head to Miss Swangstu's class in Ohio for our first question. But stay tuned, everybody. And YouTubers, you guys have been sharing a whole bunch as well. This is great. All right, let's get underway with this Kahoot. Louise, if you want to help us out with any of these questions, feel free to unmute your mic. You can give us hints as we go along here. But here we go.
Okay.
It's always fun. It's so fun for me when it's speakers that have never seen one of these before, because they're a good time. All right. Their last natural habitat. What have we been talking about? Where have we been all day? The United States? Have we been in Mexico? Have we been in Brazil? Have we been in Kenya? I hope you all get this. We talked about one of the biggest cities. For anyone who's ever been to our big city, which with 5 seconds left, I can say is Mexico City. It is an incredible place. It's one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to in the world. Such a splendid, greatest parks ever. Most of you got this right. Way to go, everybody. Let's see what that does to our leaderboard. Mighty Giraffe has our lead. Okay, we're going to go to question 2 together. Let's see. So we're in Mexico City. There's salamanders. What animal group are salamanders in? Are they reptiles, fish, amphibians, or aliens? They look pretty weird. They kind of look like they're from another world.
I like aliens.
I like aliens too. Might not be the correct answer, but it is fun to think about. So they breathe through their skin. That might be a hint for some of you. Same group as frogs. 63 of you ever interested. Yes, they are amphibians. I love amphibians. I think that they are some of the most charismatic, wonderful creatures in the world. And it's really rare we get the chance to talk about them. So that's very cool. Glad Lion takes our lead as we go to question 3. Miss Swangstu, you're first. Miss Paget's class, our 4th grade alpacas, and Miss Fisher in that order with some YouTubers there in the middle. So get ready. So there are way more in the wild than in captivity. What are we talking about today? These are species that need a lot of help. We're trying to reintroduce them. We're following them all. We talked about there being 1 million of them in captivity. So this should be false. Yes. Let's see how many of you got that right. Most of you did. That was a bit of a trickier one. Yeah. So we're bringing them back. We're working to conserve. This is the case for a lot of wildlife, is that we really need to do a lot of effort to make sure that they have this home in the wild, especially in a big city like Mexico City. So way to go, guys, as we go to our final question. Drum roll. They exhibit neoteny. We talked about this at the beginning, which means they what? Are an Aztec god, stay looking young their whole lives, are salamanders, or eat fish. This is a tricky one. Neoteny specifically. Some of these are true, but they're not what neoteny is. I've got a fun note too. Ostriches are another example of this. They're like a bird that looks like a little bird, even when they get to be a huge bird. Humans are kind of like this. Other apes are much with us. This is a bit of a trickier one. The Aztec god part is true, but neoteny is that they're looking young their whole lives. They got those gills like a young salamander. Adult salamanders don't typically look like that, but they do, which is kind of cool. All right, Fearless Mouse is second, and first for all the marbles. Bum, 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 bum. Mighty Giraffe wins our Kahoot. Way to go, everybody. Well, thanks for playing along, everyone. And Luis, we're going to get to our questions now. So Miss Swangstu's class, I'm heading to you guys at Jerusalem Elementary. Unmute your mic, and you are good to go. Hey, guys.
Go ahead, ask.
How long does it take to regrow their gills?
Ooh.
How long does it take to regrow? It's about 30 days, more like a month. Could you imagine if you suddenly lose your leg and suddenly in 30 days, in a month, you will have a new leg? That will be pretty amazing. That's the reason I think they are like superheroes.
That is pretty amazing. I'm curious specifically, just in case, they can do that with some of their gills as well? So if they
Yeah,
lose
of course.
Yeah.
The gills are also, and I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, I stuck with limbs, but the gills they delay less. They delay like 15 days, like
Wow.
2 weeks. I mean, in 2 weeks they have very nice gills when they have the proper conditions.
So I'm going to head to Cherokee, Texas for Miss Badgett's class in just a second, but we had a great follow-up question to this from Miss Kinney's group online, and they wanted to know what happens if they lose half their body? Like, is there a limit to how much of themselves they can lose and still regenerate? Arik wants to know that.
Oh yeah, no, of course there is a limit. I mean, if they lose the head, for example, they die and then they can't regrow the complete head, for example. So if they lose, I mean, every time they lose something, they is like spending a lot of energy and a lot of part of the tissue. So when they lose more parts of the body, then they started to lose the capacity for regrowing everything. So, for example, when they are child, they can regrow part of the brain and part of the eyes, but when they grow, they can't do it anymore. So this is part of the interesting things about the axolotls. Yeah,
that is very cool. I didn't know that. How neat is that? Miss Padgett's class, we're gonna head to you guys. Come on in, Cherokee, take us away. Hey guys.
Hi, my name is Phoebe and I'm in 3rd grade. Are most axolotls pink?
Ooh.
That is a very good question. I mean, no, sorry, but the axolotls that are pink that you see in pet stores or you see in Google in the computer are mostly from the tanks. I mean, because pink or white, they are more characteristics and everybody loves them because they look quite amazing. They want to reproduce them all the time. So pink with pink gives pink. But basically in the wild, most of them are brown dark or green dark. And actually a pink one or a white one wouldn't survive properly in the wild because they camouflage with the bottom of the lake. So a brown one, a dark one can be camouflaged very easily, but a pink one will be seen for a aquatic bird or something like that, and will be catch very easily for a snake or for an aquatic bird. So no, normally they are dark, not pink.
I used to work at a museum in Toronto and they had both dark ones and light ones in the tank. And from 20 feet away, you can see the white ones. Like, they're so bright, they're so easy to see. So if you're a predator, it would just be like, oh, free snack, great. So I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, guys. Our 4th grade alpacas, come on in, Asheville, take us away. Hey, guys.
My name is Oliver, and I wanted to know, what is your favorite species of axolotl?
Ooh.
Very good question, Oliver. Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, because I work with axolotl with Ambystoma mexicanum, which is the one that is famous, this is my favorite species. But there is another one that I like a lot is Ambystoma belasi, which lives in a large lake in the west part of Mexico, which is called Pátzcuaro, and the axolotl there is called achoque, not axolotl, but achoque. And this is a little bit lighter. It's like a light brown with small dots in the middle. And I like them also a lot because they remind me when I was a student and I used to visit them a lot.
How nice is that? Thanks, man. That's a great answer. Great question, guys. We're coming back to everyone for a second round of questions too, by the way. We've got lots of time, but Luis was super fast. Miss Fisher's class, I'm going to head to you guys in Carsonville now. Then we'll take a quick one from you two before we head back for another round. Hey, guys.
Hi there. We have Jack with a question.
Perfect.
What does their skeleton look like?
Ooh. Their skeleton. What does their skeleton look like? I'll try to find a picture of this as we talk, but yeah.
The skeleton is look, very, very interesting question because nobody cares about the skeleton. And this is very nice that you have cared about skeleton. The skeleton is like it's not a proper skeleton. It's like the sharky type of a skeleton, which is not harsh. It's very, very soft. This type of skeleton, and Jesse, you have to remind me how you can say this in English, because I can't remember. It's like like fish are divided in two.
Yep.
Real
bony fish and cartilaginous, like
cartilaginous. Yeah,
cartilaginous, like our nose and like our ears. So sharks are like that. So they don't have like a skeleton that's like bony. It doesn't look like a horse skeleton or a person skeleton. A lot of the stuff degrades. If you feel your nose, that's hard, but it's not hard like a bone is hard. So it disappears, sort of thing. It doesn't fossilize. It doesn't stick around. That's very cool.
That is the point, and I discovered that in the hard way, because when we try to measure the amount of the year, I mean, how many years they live, because you have an axolotl and you catch an axolotl and you don't know how old is it. Normally, with lizards, for example, that they have really bones, then you can cut a little bit of the finger and you will see rings like trees. Then so every ring is a year that they had passed. But because axolotls have cartilages, then they don't have this type of rings, and it's very difficult to know the age of an axolotl because of that.
This is actually a really good question, because we've got a student in Miss Fangchu's class that has this question: how long do they live? So if we can't tell in the wild, how about in captivity? Have we had one where it's lived for a few years or decades or anything else where we can get a sense? Great question, guys.
Yeah, that is a very, very good question. I mean, the ones that we have here in our colony has been about 8, mostly 10 years. I mean, they can't live too much more after 10 years. Some of the people outside of Mexico, they say that they have axolotls for 15, even 20 years. But I don't believe too much about that. It's like fishermen that they like to brag about the large of the fish.
All right, fish this big, yeah.
Exactly.
Great answer. And by the way, I'm going to go to Miss Paget's class for a question next. But like, what kind of like laser dance party is happening in this class? You guys are having so much fun. I love it. We'll come back to you guys in a second. That rocks. Cherokee. By the way, Louis, I want to note Miss Paget's class. This classroom is like a third of the town. Like, it's like everybody. I always love having you. It's the most kids we've ever had in Miss Paget's group. So nice to have you in, and give us a second question. Hey guys.
Back up a little bit. Right there.
Yeah, you're perfect.
Hi, my name is Kaden, and I want to know, do axolotls have ears?
Ooh.
Very good question. There's a very fun and very nice, interesting questions. No, they don't have proper ears like we normally have, or all mammals have. They can sense movements of water. That is one of the things that they have, the sensory things, but they don't have proper ears like these ones. So that's very interesting, because I never received that type of question. So you have a very, very good group of people that have different type of questions that normally I answer.
Even by our typical standards, this has been a great Q&A. Like, you kids are like on the ball, and this is always the fun, is that you never know what's going to ask. That is awesome, guys. If you see frogs, sometimes it's a great example. They'll have ears where it just looks like a different color on the side of their head, but it's not coming out like ours come out, cartilage. So great question, guys. Our alpaca crew, I'm going to come to you, and then Miss Fisher's class. And then I think time flies and you're having fun. But I want to note for our kids, if you have more axolotl questions, get them to us at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I'm going to send an email to all your classes. And if you have any more, get them to me. We'll get you those answers after we're done, since we can't take them all in one broadcast. But alpaca crew, Asheville, if you guys want to come back in, you're good. Just flick on your mic or camera, whatever you'd like, and we'll go. Hey, guys.
My name's Opal, and if you cut an axolotl in half, would it grow from the half with the head or the half with the tail?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear properly. Sorry.
No, I can repeat. It's like that regeneration question again. So, I mean, when people think about regeneration with a worm, they think about it cutting in half and maybe 2 worms come. If you cut an axolotl in half, could the second half grow? It won't regrow a head. The head cannot regrow.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. The head cannot regrow. Also, if you cut an axolotl in half, both of the halves will be dead. I mean, because it can't regrow, because all the functions, the physiological functions are finished in that moment, because some of those, I mean, all of the animal needs, for example, the stomach or the gills to breathe, or part of the intestine. So if you cut in half and you leave the stomach in one part and gills in the other part, both of them will be dead. So if you cut the tail doesn't have any important function to survive in the following months. So they can regrow the tail, or they can regrow the limbs, or they can regrow the gills, not because they are not important to breathe, but because the axolotls can breathe in 3 ways. I mean, one is through the mouth. I mean, they go up and then have a small scoop of air with the mouth. And the second is through the skin. And the third one is with the gills. So if they lose the gills, they have other options to breathe. But if they lose the stomach or they lose the head, they don't have any other options to survive. That's the reason you can't cut an axolotl in half and expect to survive any of the halves.
One of my favorite lines in the history of exploring by the seat of your pants: if you cut them in half, each half is dead. Poor axolotls. Well, hopefully we're not cutting them in half. We're going to leave them alive, and we're going to save even more of them. Perfect. We got a quick YouTube question, and then we're going to wrap up with Miss Fisher in a minute. One from our online crew just wanted to know how many different kinds there are in the world. I think you might have mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but how many kinds of axolotl are there on Earth?
How many kind of axolotls are on Earth? Basically, most of them are in Mexico City. The ambistomids are about 30-something species, but the ones that are highly interesting, like this one, that some of them are neoteny, that we learned this word earlier, are 17 in Mexico. So most of them are in Mexico. All of them are in Mexico. The interesting ones are in Mexico. Some of them are in the west part of the city, of the country. Others are in the center part of the country. And some of them are in the north part of the country. But the 17 species live in Mexico. And one of those goes to the US and also even to Canada, arrived to Canada.
I'm Team Canada today, representing the entire nation. So I'm really happy to hear that. I might have to come to Mexico to see more of them, though. That sounds pretty fun. Ms. Fisher, we're going to head to you guys to wrap up in a minute. I want to stress again, if you want to check out our Wild Hope series, we've got a few more in this series to go before the time runs out. I'm going to send you Wild Hope TV and specifically the whole episode on axolotls. If you want to watch an amazing 20-minute clip with Luis, lots to explore there too. And this one will be on our YouTube channel to share with your friends and family as well. But Ms. Fisher's class, we're going to head to you. Come on in to wrap us up. Hey, guys.
Hi, we have John with a question.
John?
Is it a good thing or a bad thing for people that have them as pets?
Great question.
Oh, you are really, really good in having questions, actually. This is not an easy question. I mean, since I am a biologist and I like them in the wild, I wouldn't have them as a pet in the tanks. I understand that a lot of people loves them as much as they can have them, and they will have them in their own tanks. Let me tell you that if you treat them properly in a large size tank with a very nice temperature, with a good live food, because they like to eat fish alive, for example. So maybe you can have them, but for conservation purposes, that is not useful. So for conservation, this is only for you and your necessities to have them as a pet. But for conservation, the only way of conservation is conserving their habitat. That is part of the important thing. People think that because they have them in tanks, they are good in conservation, and that is not true. It's like if you imagine like a polar bear, for example. The polar bear are also in risk of extinction because the polar caskets are going down, etc., etc. So, they are lovely. So if you want to have one of those, it's very, very difficult to have them in a proper facility. So for me, it's the same type of things that to have a polar bear, but instead of having in a huge freezer, you will have it in a tank. Remember that axolotls can travel 100 meters, 200 meters per day. So if you have them in a small tank, they will be a little bit frustrated that they can't move too much.
That is a beautiful and nuanced answer. No, I love this. And I was really hoping you were going to get that question. So thanks so much for wrapping us up with that, man. Luis, before we wrap up and say farewell to all our classes in like a minute, is there any last message you want to leave with our kids about axolotls or your work before we say goodbye?
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things for me that I learned in the last 20 years working with axolotls is that the most important thing for the axolotls is the preservation of the habitat. If you don't preserve the habitat, it doesn't matter if you have a very nice axolotl in many times around the world. The important thing is the preservation of the habitat. So if you have a small animal or a big animal close to your community, it's better to preserve their habitat instead of thinking that this is a very cute animal and I want to have it, or I want to see it in the zoo.
Yeah, this is true for pretty much every conservation story that we feature at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you didn't have a home, it would be hard for you to live. That's true of animals all around the world, whether it's deep sea or tropical rainforest or beautiful lakes. We need to make sure animals have habitats. When we give animals those habitats, they do come back. Conservation has been wildly successful when we just preserve those places. So no better message than that, Luis. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and expertise today. And what we do to wrap up every program, I'm going to bring in our classes to say a big thank you and farewell. So Miss Swangshu's class, Miss Paget's class, Miss Fisher's class, join me in saying farewell. Thank you so much, everybody.